Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to the next edition of the Mountain BOCES Teacher to Teacher webinar series. Tonight we have Natalie Moore, Family and Youth Initiatives Program Manager. Natalie is the Program Manager for Family and Youth Initiatives, FYI, which is the acronym. She joined the FYI team in April 2010 as Chaffee County Mentoring Program Coordinator and Youth in Action Program Coordinator. FYI currently supports prevention programs within Chaffee County by offering nurturing parenting programs, adult to youth mentoring, middle school to preschool mentoring, teen drug and alcohol classes, and other community needs. Natalie received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from Metropolitan State College of Denver in 2004, followed shortly thereafter with her art education with her art education K-12 teacher licensure in January 2005. Natalie has taught art education K-12, has worked with nonprofits including the Center for Visual Arts, Denver Public Housing, and the Boys and Girls Club of Chaffee County. Natalie, please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Will. Thanks everybody for being here. You're all so brave. It's not only Monday night, it's the day after the time change. So I'm assuming you're all in your pajamas or something of the like. I'm going to try to make this as fun, as interactive as possible. Will will be here to help us with any technical difficulties because I have no clue how to help you with any of that. So you can just type things in the chat box for him and he can see that. You can also type in the chat box for me so I know that you're participating, and we will do some things where I will ask you to type in the chat box because I'm quite used to being in front of people and reading the crowd and seeing if anyone's falling asleep and being able to change my spiel. So, so I will appreciate any cyber head nods letting me know that you're engaged. So today we are going to talk about poverty in the classroom, or how poverty affects classroom engagement. And we're going to go over part one is kind of going to be just an introduction of framework for understanding poverty. We won't go through the whole poverty piece because what I really want to get to is tools that you can put in your toolbox so that when you see these things happening in your classroom, you're able to react and have some great skills to have with you. So we are going to do part one, just the introduction, and part two, how we're going to do that in our classroom. So I'm going to move to the next slide. Thank you for participating in the chat box. We are going to talk about some hidden rules among the classes, the 8 resources for students and families, our economic realities and patterns of living, explaining how language, vocabulary, so some of those things show up, our mental models, and improving outcomes for our students. So I hope you're all here for those things. So our housekeeping today is going to be about self-care. So like I know it's 7 o'clock, but it feels a little later than that. So I'm going to keep us engaged, hopefully. This Ninja cell phone game I play with every presentation I do, whether it's a webinar or face-to-face. And that basically means if you need to address your cell phone, you need to do it like a ninja, so we can't hear you, we can't see you. We are going to get up, we are going to stand up. This is going to be lots of fun since I can't see you, but we are going to get up, we're going to stretch, we're going to do some things to make sure we're still engaged. I want us to be careful about what does this trigger in me. Sometimes when we talk about poverty and sometimes we talk about the families that we work with, sometimes it gets a little pokey, meaning it's going to trigger something in me personally, and that's okay, and that's completely normal. We're also going to see how this is how we can apply this in our classroom, or how we can do that working with families or working with our community. So if you have a piece of paper or a note card, you can bring out and jot down some ideas. That's the way that this is going to be helpful. And like Will said, the PowerPoint will be available. But for me, I think it makes a lot of sense for you to be able to take notes, and any little bright ideas that you have, be able to write them down and access them hopefully tomorrow. So to get started, to talk about poverty, we have to do it in a way that we talk about different lenses. Poverty does not happen just within an individual. It happens within these 4 different lenses, and we call it a triple lens, and I'll tell you why. So first of all, we have an individual. So an individual may be our student, it may be the family, it may be the parent. So that's the individual that is possibly living in poverty or dealing with poverty. Then we have the institution, which in many cases for us, it's our school, it's the Health and Human Services office, it's the hospital. There's ways that institutions deal with poverty. Then we have communities. So my community is Chaffee County. How does my community deal, address, help, or hinder those in poverty? And then the overlying bigger point is the policy. So the way that we look at this as an example would be an individual would say, hi, Mrs. Moore, I'm the mom of Joey and we live in poverty. That would be the individual. The institution could be our school, for example, and we would say to the individual, hey, the institution may say, we noticed that Joey's not having lunch, so as the institution, as school, we're going to offer free lunch. As a community, we may address a problem of poverty by seeing that Joey's not receiving free lunch when school's not in session, so we're going to work with our community partners such as Boys and Girls Club, and we'll provide free lunch during the summer so that our kids can receive lunch. Policy would be, there's a policy put in place that has the amount of money you can or cannot make to qualify for free and reduced lunch. So that's how we see those 3, the triple lens with the policy overarching all of them, because you have to have a policy and it usually affects the individual, the institution, and the community. So we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna ask you, what's your favorite lens through which to view this kind of information? So are you working with the individual? Are you working with your school, the institution? Are you working with your community? Or are you so engaged in poverty that you're actually wanting to make some policy change? So I'm going to give you a moment to type in what's your favorite lens through which to view this information. And it may not be your favorite, it may be the one that you get addressed every day. Thank you, and thank you for participating. All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you. I'm feeling the love. Perfect. So now, as a community here on this webinar, you're going to hold up your right hand. You're going to put out your right pinky. And we are all going to pinky swear that from this moment on, we are open to viewing poverty on all of these different levels. So not just the individual, not just the institution, not just the community, not just the policy, but all 4 lenses. So everyone has their right hand held up with their pinky high, like you're going to drink tea. And you're going to pinky swear from this moment on that you are going to look at poverty from all 4 different levels. Okay, now my pinky is tired. Obliga, put your pinky down. And we've all pinky sweared that we're going to move on and we are going to look at poverty from all of these different levels. Pinky swear, I see it. Thank you. So what we're talking about technically is called Bridges Out of Poverty. Bridges Out of Poverty, unfortunately, is not, it's not just it's something that once we talk about it, it's not going to solve all of our poverty problems, unfortunately. But what it is, its goal is to improve the relationships at the individual level, hopefully improve some of our outcomes on the organizational level, change some systems that we have at a community level. And we're going to help prevent poverty, alleviate some suffering in your classroom, and support people in transition, and then hopefully ultimately eliminate poverty. That's our Rainbow Sunshine Unicorn goal. So why this all happened with me personally is because, yes, as Will said in my bio, I am with Chaffee County Mentors family and youth initiatives. And what was happening is we were having all of these amazing mentors come to us and want to mentor youth. 90% of the youth that Chaffee County mentors supports live in poverty. So when we had these great adult mentors coming to us, they were having some issues dealing with their mentees and the mentees' family. And I would say the pattern was it was not understanding how families lived in poverty. So these middle class mentors, who are fabulous, by the way, were really struggling with dealing with, why is my mentee not have a winter coat, but the family just bought a large screen TV, right? So some of those triggers. So what was that triggering in that person personally? Was not how that person was raised, and not really being able to understand why the mentee was being raised in that way. So we said we really need to get this training. So I went and did the several day training. So I am licensed and certified in Bridges Out of Poverty training. So that's why that all came about. This is a fun little quote, which is, no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. So again, we'll talk about this later when it comes up in your classroom, but really when I was a kid, and now even as an adult, I really want to work for people. I really want to work hard for people that I have a significant relationship with. If I believe that my therapist, for example, really likes me and believes in me, I'm probably more likely to work on the hard stuff. So same with teaching. If I feel like I have a connection with my teacher, I'm probably more apt to really work hard and do what my teacher asks me to do. So that's why that's there. So then another reason why this is important to me is because as a child, I grew up in poverty. My parents were 18 when they had me, and they worked at Pizza Hut. So that's my mom at 18, and that's me a couple weeks old. I look a little bit different. But it is, there is some things that are very personal to me about this training, and I will kind of weave in some of my personal experiences and how it affected me as a child growing up. And for some of you, this may also be the case as well.
Okay, thanks everybody. So that's perfect, because these are always my worst nightmares, and so then I can get them over with. And now, woo, we're going to move on. So I have done this where my PowerPoint didn't work, and I had to do the whole thing without my images. So at least you can hear me. Okay. So I was saying there's a lot of information about poverty, and you may have experienced it yourself, and there's lots of people that want to write about it. So you've probably heard of Ruby Payne. Ruby Payne is the one that wrote a framework for understanding poverty, or framework of poverty. She's also written Bridges Out of Poverty, which is a lot of the information that I've gotten. Then she has all these other books up here on my slide, Getting Ahead, so on and so forth. Then we have Eric Jensen. So Eric Jensen then came out, and he started reading the book, or writing books about poverty as well. So his are on the screen, the red one and the blue one. So Eric Jensen we will reference today as well, because I know there's lots of information out there, and sometimes it has conflicting information. So today we're going to kind of meld Ruby Payne with Eric Jensen, and here's why. So Ruby Payne was a teacher. And her experience working with kids in poverty, she came up with her own definition of poverty. And her definition is on the screen. It says an extent to which an individual does without resources. Then she defined 8 different resources: financial, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical, support systems, relationships and role models, knowledge of the hidden rules, and coping strategies. So that's definitely a Ruby Payne definition. If you were in the book Bridges Out of Poverty, it's on page 11. But since we know there's lots of information out there, because we are educators and we like to learn, Eric Jensen, his books came out. His definition is a chronic and debilitating condition that results from multiple adverse synergistic risk factors and affects the mind, body, and soul. So really they're saying the same thing, just how they're going about it is very different. I like both of them on some levels, so we're just going to kind of be in this little melting pot of the two of them coming together, with a little Natalie thrown in there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stand up. So I'm for serious. So I'm going to stand up. I have the phone in my hand. I have a PowerPoint going on. I'm in my office. I'm going to stand up. So both of my feet are planted on the floor. And I want you guys all to stand up and do that as well. So I see you all. Some of you are hesitating, but I really want you to stand up. So wherever you are, scoot the cat off your lap, stand up for a second, and I want you to just pick a spot on the floor to look at or to close your eyes, and we're going to come up with a mental model for winter. It's right around the corner. You can almost smell it. So what I want you to do is close your eyes. I want you to think about, what does winter smell like? Does it smell like hot chocolate and peppermint schnapps? Does it smell like ski wax? What does it smell like? So just take a minute, close your eyes, find a spot on the floor to look at, and think about, what does winter smell like? Now I want you to think about, what does it feel like? Does it feel like a cold nose? Does it feel like hand warmers? Does it feel like a comfy, snuggly scarf? Does it feel like windburn from skiing? So what does it feel like? What does it taste like? And what does it look like? So some of you are doing an awesome job, and you're typing in the chat box some of your responses. And I would like everyone to take a moment to maybe tell me what it looks like to you. Does it look like blue skies and white-capped snow mountains? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? And I'm going to look here, I'm looking, and I'm going to sit back down. So we have clementines, sharpness of cold, frozen hair, a Christmas cottage, warm fires. Ooh, that sound of the popping in the fire. I love that. Pine, cedar. Oh, scary driving, Samantha. Snowflakes, crisp, freezing. Good. You all are getting gold stars for participating and making me feel loved. Great. So I see a few of the cold. So I feel like with the feeling cold, right? We have cold hands, cold feet. We have cold winter day, cold nose. So what I'm doing with a mental model is I'm going to look for patterns. So in a mental model, because there is what I'm seeing in our chat box is there's a pattern of the word cold coming up. So if you didn't include cold, that doesn't mean that what you said is wrong. It means that a majority of us are saying cold. Okay? So when we create a mental model, and a mental model is really important because it's an internal picture of how the world works for you. Sometimes it exists below awareness, and it can determine how we act, and it can also interfere with our learning. Yes. So, Grace, thank you. What happens with mental models? If I have a mental model of what winter looks like, feels like, and we say cold, but I'm from Florida, that can be a problem for me because it's going to determine how I act, and I could tell you, I could say, you know, Grace, no, winter is not cold. And you'd be like, yes, it is. So we have to suspend mental models for dialogue to occur. Okay, so that's what a mental model is. So a mental model is just our internal picture of how the world works. And for some reasons, I point this out, just being a past teacher, is sometimes when we do standardized testing and there's a story problem and it has something to do with a mental model, sometimes students can get hung up on that because their mental model is very different. This you've probably run into in your classroom when you're talking about family. For some people, family is a mom, a dad, you know, and they live in a home. And for others, family does not mean just a mom and a dad in a home. It may mean grandparents. It may mean aunts and uncles. It may be friends that live with us that we call auntie and uncles. So these are our mental models. For us, for educators, and for folks working with students, We have to suspend our mental models if we want dialogue and relationships to occur. Y'all are making me excited for winter. All right, so we're going to create some mental models here together today. So we just did one for winter, so we participated in creating a mental model together. We could continue with the mental model and saying, okay, what other patterns were we seeing in the chat box? We saw cold. Did we hear snow? Did we see wooded pine? Those kinds of things. And we could continue on a mental model. But for right now, we're going to move on to a mental model of poverty. So what we're going to do again is we're going to think about an adult or a student that we know that lives in generational poverty. So then we're going to imagine if we followed them around for at least a year, how would they have spent their time? What would they have been worried about? What would they have been doing? And then what we would do if we were so inclined would be write in a circle these things that represent an average day. But due to the magic of a webinar, we've already done that together. Congratulations. Here we are. So we've created a mental model of poverty. So within our circle are the things that our students or our families living in generational poverty would kind of worry about, or things that they would deal with. So they woke up this morning and they may be worried about transportation, right? How am I going to get to school? How am I going to get to work? Is the car going to start? Do I have a vehicle? Do I need to bum a ride for someone? So transportation would be in there. Friends and family. So we know a lot of times in poverty we have to rely on our friends and our family. We might be worried about our safety. We have multiple jobs, so we might be going to multiple places, working different shifts, so on and so forth. Health, chemical dependency, mental health, housing, criminal justice system, food, child care, children, entertainment, agency time, clothing, and debt. Okay, so those are some of those things that we're creating a mental model for poverty. Within that circle in really big letters is relationships. That's the driving force behind poverty, is relationships. So my driving force in poverty, living in poverty, is those relationships. I rely on relationships for transportation. I rely on relationships for childcare. I might rely on a relationship for money, helping each other out. So that's kind of the driving force. The other bubbles around our big circle says social services, schools, police, religious organizations. And those are maybe how I have a relationship with those agencies. So I may have a relationship with social services because I'm receiving services there. I may have a relationship with a religious organization because I know they have a free dinner on Thursday nights. And then at the bottom is businesses, so how I may interfere with businesses or those businesses pop up around those living in poverty. So that's our mental model of poverty for right now. And this is so that I can get to the good stuff about how this all comes up in our classroom. Yes, payday loans show up around our low-income housing areas. So that's kind of interesting. That would be community. All right, middle class is a little bit different. So if you have a middle class mindset, the middle class mindset then has these things inside of the circle, which would be education, family and friends, clubs and civic groups, careers, cost of education, housing and assets, prevention, working longer hours, credit card debt, retirement, cost of child care, mortgage payments, children, vacations, hobbies, and interest. And the driving force behind middle class is achievement. So if you noticed, in the poverty circle, we didn't really talk about vacations, but we do in middle class. We talked about jobs in poverty, and now in middle class we talk about careers. We're also worried about cost of child care in middle class, whereas in poverty we just needed child care, and sometimes that just means a neighbor or somebody else. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm looking for the best place to put my my child for child care, and so those kinds of things. The driving force for middle class is achievement, so making sacrifices in my life for achievement are thumbs up in middle class just like you all are here, an hour getting a webinar. I think you all are pretty much middle class. And then how does middle class work with social services, schools, police, and religious organizations? That looks a lot different. And then businesses that we see popping up in middle class neighborhoods or office complex, you know, your Starbucks and restaurants and bars. So we're going to move on to wealth. So our mental model of wealth is board of directors, private clubs and associations. Look, we have travel. If you look on the other side, we also have vacation. We have oversight of corporate property, personal concerns, media and political, event sponsorship, attendance, lawyers, accountants, national and international advisors, and the driving force for wealth are connections. So those are the 3 different mental models. Why those are important, we'll talk about here in a second, but I just do want you to know that a mental model is just a description of the concrete experience. It shows a part of the whole. It's important because of its relative importance, the interlocking nature of the elements. And so within poverty, for example, it's hard to have a future story if you have no choice on power and no power, when that's kind of your mental model of how life is. So we're just kind of really talking about poverty as an economic environment. We're not going to go into why certain people are in poverty. We're not going to talk about race. We're not going to talk about any of those things. And we're really going to specifically stay here in Chaffee County, stay in Colorado. Economic class is relative. So just because someone lives in poverty does not necessarily mean that they're stuck with that mental model or they're stuck in those thinking processes. So this is just the 2015 poverty guidelines. This you can also find on the website, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So this is the actual guidelines to be considered at the level of poverty, and this is all in the 48 states. So this is on the left-hand side, the family size, and the right-hand side is your annual income. So then when you go to Health and Human Services and you're trying to apply for food assistance, cash assistance, they're going to look at your annual income and then determine what services you can receive based on your annual income. So that's a fun little fact. The next little fun fact I pulled from Kids Count in Colorado, 2015. You can get a hold of this. This is usually in your principal's office. You can stop by and see me. I have several copies. It's a great thing to have to look at what's going on in the state of Colorado. So the county data, so in 2013, school-age children ages 5 to 17 in the state of Colorado, it's 15.7% of children ages 5 to 17 live in poverty. Then you can look, I just put a few up here to give you an example, but the Kids Count in Colorado, the actual publication, goes through every county, but I just wanted you to look at, so example for Chaffee County, we are above the Colorado average, so we are 18.6% of our children ages 5 to 17 live in poverty. You all probably see that, and I don't have to prove that to you. And then you can kind of look at some of the surrounding areas like Alamosa, Conejos, and Saguache. So just to let you know, that's what's out there. Sometimes in this presentation, I really have to prove that beautiful Chaffee County has poverty, and that takes up a large part of the presentation. So luckily, I think you all see it daily. So we're going to move on. Another key point is generational poverty and situational poverty are different, and that the generational poverty is 2 or more generations living in poverty. That's how you measure that it's generational poverty versus situational poverty. And then the work is based on patterns within the environments of economic class, and of course all patterns have exceptions. And Kimberly, I'm not ignoring you, I just don't know how to answer your question at this moment. So I will look at how it is measured, and we'll get back to that. An individual brings with him or her the hidden rules of the class in which he or she was raised. So I was raised in poverty, and now that I'm a middle class adult, I still have hidden rules that I learned while I was living in poverty that come to me, and I still have them with me here now in middle class. And we'll talk about what a hidden rule is here in a moment. What else is important is schools and businesses operate from a middle class norm, and we use we use the hidden rules of middle class. So working in an institution like a school or an institution like I do at the Human Services Office, we do things that are very middle class, and we expect those that live in poverty to adhere to our kind of rules and standards, and they may not know what they are. So that's why we're going to talk about hidden rules and why they are important. And you might have been raised in middle class, and then when you're talking with a family that lives in poverty, you may break a hidden rule, and usually you know it because you get an eye roll. Key point number 8 is in order to build relationships of mutual respect between economic classes, we need to be aware of more than one set of hidden rules. Pretty self-explanatory. And in order to achieve, one may have to give up relationships at least for a time. And if you remember back to our very first mental model of poverty, the thing that makes the wheelhouse of poverty keep moving is relationships. So asking someone to give up or disconnect from a relationship is very difficult. So this is why we will talk about why building relationships with our students is so important. So relationships is a big part of this. All right, so we're going to get into the hidden rules. And we're going to go over a hidden rule of food. So a hidden rule, like I said, is a hidden rule. But we're going to expose a few of them today. So a hidden rule around food and poverty is, did you have enough? And quality is important. So you see this showing up in your classroom. We see this showing up with Chaffey County Mentors, where we ask the kids to bring lunch to an event. Okay, so lunch comes to an event, lunch comes to the school. It's a sleeve of Pringles and a Monster drink. So some of my kids, that's their favorite lunch. And that might be because it was an inexpensive purchase. You can have a whole sleeve of Pringles for the same price as, something that's a little more nutritious. But again, I need to know I have a lot of it, so quantity is important. When I visit the food banks here or the churches, I will notice that there are sometimes notes next to the ramen noodles that you're only allowed to take one. So apparently taking multiple ramen noodles has been a problem in the past. Middle class, our question is, did you like it? And quality is important. So what's the quality of the product? What's the quality of what I'm getting? And did I like it? And then in wealth, the hidden rule is, was it presented well? So presentation trumps anything else. So poverty, middle class, that's our hidden rules around food. And I think we've seen this show up. This isn't to say any of these things are right or wrong. It's just the hidden rule that happens around food. I'll do a few more. Poverty, time. So in poverty, present is most important. Decisions are made for the moment, and they're based on feelings or survival. I call it the crisis du jour. So a lot of my families will call me, and I'm listening for what's the crisis du jour? What's the crisis of the day? I have families that are being evicted, families that need winter coats, families that need these things, and we needed them like now. So not a lot of planning goes in and a lot of thought process because everything is kind of dealing with what's in front of us right now. And in middle class, we're really, we like to plan. So our future is most important. Decisions are made against future ramifications. So a decision that I make today, I know may have consequences later on down the road. Not the case in poverty. And then in wealth, traditions and history are most important. And decisions are made on tradition. So that's kind of hidden rules around time. So we need to think about those things sometimes when we know that. that our families maybe are coming to us in that crisis du jour mode, and planning is not something that we really think about. So that's a skill that we get to teach. Then in destiny, poverty believes in fate, and I can't do much to mitigate chance. So bad things are going to happen to me. This is just the way it is. You might hear, well, I'm just a bad student. I'm never going to be a better student because, you know, I can't do anything to change any of that, and I leave things up to chance. Middle class, we believe in choice. We believe that we can change the future with our good choices that we make today. And then wealth, this is French noblesse oblige, which is I'm just basically like it's going to be good. It's all going to work out. So if you imagine a student coming into your class, one that lives in poverty is coming in saying, there's nothing I can really do to change my fate. Here I am. Then you have someone, a student in middle class, it's like, okay, if I make a really good choice today, my future will be better. And then a student that comes from wealth, that's just like, you know, great things are going to happen to me. So if you're kind of walking in with that kind of already mental attitude, you know, we have our work cut out for us as folks that are working with those students. So the hidden rules, so what can we do with the hidden rules? We can direct teach the hidden rules. So I don't say to a student, hey, that's a hidden rule, but I will say, you know, for example, in school being on time is important, and then and why is that important outside of school? Teach that there are different sets of rules for different classes. Know that you have hidden rules in your school and your classroom, and then understand that there are going to be some families that obviously are showing up with their own set of hidden rules. All right, so then language. So we usually use a formal language in school, so it's the standard sentence syntax and word choice for school, and we have complete sentences and specific word choice. And then what's usually happening in a family that's living in poverty is that we have casual language, which is the language between friends. It's characterized by a 400 to 800 word vocabulary. Word choice is general and not specific, and this is the key point for some of us as educators. The conversation is dependent upon nonverbal assists, so a lot of body language. So that may hinder or help us in the classroom if we're a student or a teacher. So the research out there about the language is if we're living in poverty, and they call it welfare on this slide, if you're exposed to like the 13 million words, not only are you exposed to less words than, say, a working class or middle class family, which is exposed to 26 words, the affirmations, so in poverty, for every one positive, that child is going to hear 2 negatives, so 2 discounts. And in middle class, for every 2 positives, they hear 1 negative. So that's a big difference, and that's what they're coming to us in our schools, in our programs. And then a professional would be someone maybe with a PhD. They're exposing their children to 45 million words, and they give out 6 positives for every 1 negative. So we're going to come back to this and why that's important and what we can do in our classroom. So this slide is talking about the language that children are being exposed to in their home, and this is ages 1 to 4. So we're going to talk about what we do at school. All right, we're going to move on to the 8 resources. So again, Ruby Payne says the extent to which an individual does without resources. So poverty is not just financial, it's also emotional, mental, can be spiritual, physical, and then lacking or not having support systems or relationships or role models, and then this knowledge of the hidden rules. Okay, so then our knowledge of the hidden rules, that the different classes have hidden rules, that can also kind of deplete your basket. And then we're going to talk about how we can do with relationships, so the connections, having bonding relationships, and bridging relationships. This is a quote, if you have come to help me, you can go home again, but if you see my struggles as part of your own survival, then perhaps we can work together. So again, this is how do we work together. All right, so now we're going to kind of go into how we're going to deal with this in our classroom. So if you could all stand up. I'm serious again. Stand up. I see you back there eating your Cool Ranch Doritos. Stand up. We're getting close to wrapping this up. This is the goods part. This is the part you've all been waiting for. So we've gone through the whole part of reviewing what poverty is so that we have a baseline for what we're talking about. Obviously, I have a longer training that's just about poverty, but right now we're going to get into health and nutrition. So before we do that, since we're standing up, we're going to do a little stretching, and we're going to take our right hand and we're going to touch our left shoulder. And pause. And then we're going to take our left hand, so you can release your right hand. Left hand, cross over to touch your right shoulder. And pause. Take your right hand, reach over to touch your left kneecap. Release. Left hand, reach over to your right kneecap. All right, and now shake your arms out. I want everyone to take a big deep breath in and out. And in and out. This would be really funny if we had a camera, but we don't. So I'm assuming you all have done that. We're going to shake it out, and we're going to sit back down if we need to. Keep standing if you need to, and we're going to talk health and nutrition. So the hidden rule about food. Okay, so like I said, we've all seen this. We watch our families walk out of the grocery store and they're loaded up with a bunch of what we consider junk, right? And we're just like, oh my gosh. And as educators and middle-class people that are really concerned about our students, we know, I know when that kid comes to the ski trip with Chaffey County Mentors and eats a thing of Pringles and drinks a Monster drink, that they are going to be on a sugar high and then they are going to crash. And that's not going to be good for anybody. And I know that, and I just know that because of the research that's out there, because of my own personal research of how I feel when I do that. But I can't stop that, right? I know that's a hidden rule. I know if I was to say, that's the most unhealthy lunch on the planet, that is a hidden rule, and I am not going to be able to create a relationship with that person, and that's really, that's really called judgment. So also, we didn't really talk about, but what do you guys think the poverty mental mindset is about health? If it's the crisis du jour and I need my teeth pulled because I now have an abscess, then I'm going to talk to you about health, and I'm going to talk to you about brushing, and I'm going to talk to you about flossing. But we did not see prevention in our mental mindset of poverty. We saw prevention show up in middle class. So here's how this shows up in our classroom, and this is some information taken from the Eric Jensen information, so some of his books. Eric Jensen really talks about how these effects are showing up in our classroom and what we can do about it. All right, so we know, thumbs down, that our students in poverty, some of our families in poverty, we have a lack of exercise, they're not getting proper diagnosis or medical treatment, poor nutrition, poor diets. So we see it show up as low sagging energy in their classroom seats or hyper sugar high. This is not good for us as educators. This is not good for us as people trying to work with kids. However, this is how it's showing up. So what do we get to do? We get to go, all right, so yes, teaching about nutrition and teaching about health, so important, right? And they have to learn it somewhere. So with Chaffey County Mentors, with all of our activities, we provide healthy snacks. I always provide, even on the ski trip, I have some extra lunches packed because I have a feeling I'm going to have a kid crash because of the lunch that they brought. Not going to judge it, not going to tell them they can't eat it, but I know, and I get to direct teach, okay, how did you feel after you drank that Monster? Now how do you feel? What do you think? What if we eat a banana, right? So some of those things. All right, so we get to direct teach that. But we don't know. They show up in our classroom. We don't know what they ate before they got to school. Maybe they ate, maybe they didn't. So 2 primary foods for the brain are the oxygen and the glucose. So in the classroom, doing some of those stretching, like we just did, doing slow, deep breaths, that's all going to increase oxygen. Oxygen is free. Amazing. And we get to show our students and our children how to access free oxygen. How can they access it? We can do it as a group. We are inclusive. We have everyone up standing up. We have everybody stretching together. Okay, we have everybody doing deep breaths together. So we're doing it. Also, physical education, super important, right? Super important for oxygen, super important for health and nutrition. If you walk away with one thing today, don't withhold recess. I know you are all capable Gold Star participants in this webinar already. I know you have other ways to discipline students without withholding recess. Recess is huge for all of our students to be able to run around, to breathe, to burn off some of that, whatever they ate or didn't eat, and just really support them in that way. So just please take that one, that one away with you. All right, so health and nutrition. So super, yes, I agree, super important, getting people up, stretching. Let's do it. Perfect. Vocabulary. Okay, so if we remember, our students living in poverty are not being exposed to as many words as our students in middle class. Okay, so they have a smaller vocabulary. They're not familiar with words being used in class. So then the impact, the behavior we see is they feel stupid, they don't want to read, they tune out, or they're like, hey, school's not for me. I was one of those kids. I didn't understand some of the words. I'm asked to read out loud. I was that kid that would rather challenge you and make a scene and get you so upset at me that you would tell me to leave your classroom. Whew, I would be off the hook. I wouldn't have to read out loud. I wouldn't have to participate. I wouldn't have to feel stupid. I wouldn't have to deal with it. I'd rather deal with my mom later telling her I got sent to the hallway or got sent to the office than I would having to participate in class with something that I didn't feel comfortable with. So here's what we can do as teachers. Build the vocabulary. Keep building the vocabulary. Introduce new words by vocabulary building activities. So some examples would be creating vocabulary trading cards. Okay, so a trading card, an index card that has the vocabulary word for the day. On the other side, it has the word being used in a sentence. The kids can trade them during a class mixer. Everybody has the cards. It's not just our kids in poverty. We're inclusive. We're making it fun. Maybe we're walking around with this little class mixer, trading cards, using the words and vocabulary and sentences, and like some of the things you've already done, probably have already doing, is having a word of the day. So then when you hear any of your students using the word of the day, you get to reinforce their new vocabulary and, really just celebrating those small successes. That's vocabulary. Effort. So effort, again, poverty and destiny, I'm just doomed. But what's our driving force? Relationships. Sometimes effort, I'm up here lazy, I'm unmotivated, I don't have hope or optimism, and then stress disorder and learned helplessness. But what we get to do is build relationships. So again, when you like your teacher, you worked harder, you celebrate the small stuff, you reinforce effort. Relationships, huge. Okay, relational adversity. So if I have a single parent home, or I've had people that have created relationships with me and then they've left me, I have a sense of instability and I don't have really good role models. So this is my plug for mentors. Mentors are consistent. Teachers are consistent. office, it's the person that greets me in the morning is consistent. My bus driver is consistent. So consistency is huge. We need strong, positive, caring adults in these lives. So that's you. You're here. You're trying to gather more tools to be that person. Be inclusive in the classroom. Play the song "We Are Family" by, what was it? Anyway, you know the song I'm talking about. "We Are Family." Somebody type it in there. This is our class. This is our family. We are doing this together. Thank you, Sly and the Family Stone. Thank you. Cue the music. That's what we can bring into our classroom by creating that sense of consistency. I'm always here. This class is always here. We are together. And then that selfless plug for mentors, high fives when they walk in the door, that consistent piece. Then we have distress. Acute and chronic stress is huge in poverty, and it doesn't impair behavior. So you get the in-your-face kid, or you get the kid that's like, leave me alone, and gives you the cold shoulder. And yes, you do get inappropriate body language. So with this, what we can do as support systems is address the issue. Chronic stress is an issue. We can do that by building the relationships with the students. We can reduce stress in the classroom by being consistent and having things, continue to do the same thing, and have fun, right? So if I'm always stressed, I'm not sure what happened this morning. I'm not sure where I slept last night. I'm stressed out. I'm in the classroom now. Let's have some fun. Let's walk around. Let's get the oxygen flowing. Let's keep moving. That's with the distress. And I would notice the time. I wanted to leave just a little bit of time here at the end to answer some of your questions in the chat box. So I'm sorry I went through that really fast. Those were kind of some of the things that I wanted to go through to link some of the things that we learned about poverty to then how do they show up in the classroom as maybe the thumbs down, as let's be honest, kind of as the negative, and then as the positive, how do we address those things? So I have a question, it looks like from Grace, of what to do when the kid respects his male teacher and only has problems in classes with female teachers. I would say building a relationship with that student, finding out more about that student, who were positive females in their life, and did they have any. Usually in the hierarchy, in a family of poverty, usually the woman does, the female does have more of the power. A lot of my families that I work with, grandma actually has more weight than a lot of the others. So if I am to say, look, I'm going to call Nana, I will usually get some behavior change pretty quickly. So I think it's just about building those relationships and seeing what is it. And it is possible that if they're being raised by a single parent that's female, having a strong male role model that is a teacher is really precious. And again, that relationship is key for creating success with that student. And how do you kind of create some of those relationships, with other teachers, with that student. So hopefully that answers the question, is to kind of get to know that student and kind of what's the history there. But I wouldn't say there's any, I don't have any statistics around that poverty students do better with a male or female teacher. I think it's based off of relationships, and that could mean something prior to actually showing up. How do I respect the unspoken rules while supporting the child? I think if I'm trying to respect some of those hidden rules, like I said, I don't judge the sleeve of Pringles and the Monster drink. I try to educate around what's in that product, and maybe it's like, hey, let's read what the nutritional value is in that sleeve of Pringles. Oh, what's the serving size? Kind of make it more of a game and maybe compare it to something else. Like I said, trying to teach the hidden rules is because I want all of my students and all of the kids that I work with to be successful. So I want them to have just like a rule of a game. If I teach you how to play basketball, you can play basketball. But if I teach you how to play basketball and soccer and baseball, then you can play all of those different sports. And so I really want just to, my students to know, or the folks that I work with, that there are other rules out there for other classes, and I want them to be able to participate. And sometimes I have to direct teach them, and sometimes I go, you know, the roundabout way like you would in class around vocabulary. In closing, again, I am with Family and Youth Initiatives. You can always contact me. My number is there. It's 530-2582. We are at chaffeecountyfyi.org. I do have a full-on training I do around Bridges Out of Poverty that is much longer than an hour, and you can stand up and see me. But if you have any questions, or if you have a student that you'd like to talk more about, the number is 719-530-2582. And our website is chaffeecountyfyi.org. We also have nurturing parenting classes, drug and alcohol classes. You will see us in the community offering hopefully fun and amazing things. I'm really happy that you all use the chat box. Thank you. And I know I felt you all standing up participating. And doing my breathing exercises and stretching. So thank you. We can do more of that. And I do believe some of those things can actually just be all trainings on their own about how to incorporate stretching and breathing and activities in your classroom. And I know BOCES has amazing programs that you can also participate in for those things. And I really just, I'm honored to be able to share information with you. I'm obviously passionate about kids and youth and families, and I'd love to be a resource for you. So thank you for participating and using your chat box and staying up late for what feels like late.
Thank you, Natalie.